that the vernal equinox in 10,500 BC was the beginning of the age of Leo. So whether we like it or not, the science of astronomy is leading us to conclude that the Sphinx was carved in the 11th millennium, and we have to deal with that.
Many ancient cultures are said to have been destroyed by cataclysmic events. Could these events be explained by the theory of crustal displacement?
The Egyptians themselves tell us that their creation, their beginning, occurred after a great cataclysmic flood. Their land emerged from the waters. This date matches very well with the end of the Ice Age. It is very likely that we're looking at a civilization that has emerged from some great cataclysmic event, which in this case is probably a flood.
In my opinion, this whole mystery is closely tied up and interwoven with the mystery of the last Ice Age, and it really is a huge mystery. Everybody knows, we all learn it at school, that there was such a thing as an Ice Age. And it's very clearly established in the geological record that, for example, North America was covered with ice more than 2 miles thick, as far south as the Mississippi Delta, almost into the tropics. This ice was stable for more than 50,000 years. And then suddenly, and relatively recently, 15,000 years ago approximately, it all started to melt. And within just 2,000 years, that enormous mass of ice had completely melted down. Sea levels went up 400 or 500 feet around the world. No geologist has ever been able to explain why this happened, why the Ice Age ended so suddenly. But perhaps the answer lies in the theory of Earth crust displacement. Perhaps the reason that North America was covered with that mass of ice was because at that time it was situated much more closely to the North Pole than it is today. It was then shifted south into warmer latitudes by a displacement of the crust, and that would explain, naturally, why all that ice melted so rapidly, because it was in a much warmer climate.
In the early 1990s, some scientists from Australia discovered some beech trees 200 miles from the South Pole, which they dated to be 2 to 3 million years old. That is totally not understandable under our current assumptions about geology. Our current assumptions about geology would say that to move a continent like Antarctica to a place where it could produce beech trees would require 50, 60 million years. Now these are only 2 to 3 million years. So what we're facing here is the need for another geological theory that could move a continent the size of Antarctica to a temperate zone under 2 million years. And that's where we believe the theory of Earth crust displacement comes in.
If there was an Earth crust displacement destroying most of the Earth's population, what happened to the survivors?
After the Earth crust displacement, some areas are completely uninhabitable. They go into the frozen polar zones, and nobody can survive there. However, there are some areas where people can survive. They tend to be in the highlands because people are afraid of staying in the lowlands where the tidal waves are devastating the shores. But in these particular areas that we can isolate using the theory of Earth crust displacement, we have oases of survival, and it's precisely in those locations that we find the earliest and most important crops. And it happens not just in one area, but all around the world. It's happening in South America, it's happening in Central America, it's happening in Africa, it's happening in the Middle East, it's happening in Asia, and it's all happening around that time. There's nothing that's really much older, but suddenly, after what we believe to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, of living by hunting and gathering, suddenly we begin to experiment with agriculture. It seems to me that all of this is much more than coincidence. We believe that an advanced civilization was destroyed. The survivors who had knowledge of agriculture brought that knowledge to the inhabitants of the local areas that happened to be ecologically stable and suitable for agriculture. And they brought that knowledge and they introduced it, and from that we ultimately got the rebirth of civilization.
It's pretty clear to me from the evidence that a common legacy of architectural knowledge was passed down from remote prehistory and spread out in very widely scattered locations around the world. Ask yourself this: if you belong to a high civilization that had just been almost completely obliterated by a gigantic geological cataclysm, a movement of the crust of the earth, what would you set out to do in the future? First of all, you would set out to create buildings that were extremely stable, that would survive the worst imaginable earthquake. And that's what we find in these fingerprints of a lost architectural knowledge all around the world. A fixation, a desire to create buildings that would last forever, no matter what happened to them. And another thing that we find is a focus on trying to predict when the cataclysm will recur. What has come down to us from the ancient past seems to be a message that by a close study of astronomical phenomena, it is possible to predict when the Earth will again be visited by this all-destroying cataclysm.
From the horizon of the past, the traditions and memories of visiting cosmic teachers has remained engraved in cultural art. This tradition dates from the era when spacecraft visited Earth from distant worlds. The ancient Indians of Peru were a highly advanced civilization who lived thousands of years ago in the jungle of South America. Their traditions speak of visiting spaceman. At their reservations are the amazing Nazca lines, which are etched into the earth and which are acknowledged as being aircraft runways and landing sites. Artifacts of great age have been found which closely resemble aircraft of today.